It's actually not beer. It's black tea lemonade, but I was like, hey, it has to be there. All right. So, hey everyone. Of course, most of you know me. I'm going to do a presentation on beer ontology, which I mean, of course, why not? And during the process of learning about it or doing it, I noticed a lot of things about food ontology, which is actually quite a popular ontology these days. And everything, there's a lot of things that could be changed about it. So a great portion of my presentation is going to be talking about that. So most of my work is based on the Oxford Companion to Beer, which is quite an it was published in 2011. Garrett Oliver, great philosopher of food, actually collected most of the work. It's something. It's both an encyclopedia and a dictionary. It's actually this guy here. So that was a main source of information for my beer classes. But food ontology, as they say, it's a farm to fork ontology. They really keep mentioning that phrase over and over again. It was an ontology that was published in 2018. I think this version of it at least, and it uses this language called langual, which I'm going to explain in a bit. And it's a really applied ontology. As we go on, you'll see why. It does a great job at classifying plants, animal organisms, and the processes of cooking, packaging, and all sorts of different things that is important to food industry. So Langual, as I said, it's basically the main framework that FoodOn uses, the international framework of food description, which I still have a hard time. Language alimentaria, which means the language of food. It was created in the 1970s by FDA. These days it's actually mostly ran automatically. It basically grabs data and picks up the more important parts and phrases and tries to categorize, tries to basically find a place for them in the language system. The other source that I use a lot for my properties, for a lot of physical object qualities and properties is PADO, the phenotype and trait ontology, which actually it's a really well-developed ontology. It goes hand in hand with Go, the gene ontology, and it was really interesting. For example, as you could see, you have for temperature down here, you get the physical quality, and then of course it goes up to physical object quality, which is type of quality, which is the BFO form. But then on this side you get the deviation for the increased quality and for increased temperature eventually, and a lot of different properties as you go on. So it was a really well done ontology as I was looking at for some of the qualities in my some of the quality classes in my ontology. So there's a bunch of things that I picked up being incorrect with FoodOn, or at least I thought it was not correct. For example, one of the nicest one I was looking for fermentation process and the container, the fermenter, literally the object that has that the fermentation process is done in. And it defines fermenter as a container in which the process of fermentation takes place. But as you can see, container here is a subclass of device, but fermenter is not a subclass of container, while the definition has it to be a container. So that was one thing that was that stood out to me. The other thing that I saw was, I mean, of course, liquid. I've seen it different. I've seen it come in all forms of different, in different places, in different ontologies. Here, FoodOn decided to talk about it as a material entity rather than a quality. But then object, which is the BFO term object, is also under material entity, which that was interesting to me. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it was just something that I was a little uncomfortable with. Because, I mean, you could also say if you're recognizing liquid as an entity, why isn't liquid recognized as an object? The definition of liquid was fine. It's a really common definition for a substance in the fluid state that has no fixed shape but a fixed volume. I didn't have a problem with the definition, just the place that it was put in the ontology. So where does beer go in food on? Of course, you come down. Everything is fine up to food product, I think. But then in the in the subclasses of food product, you get things such as food product by consumer group, food product by type, and then food product by quality. These are all different classes. Rather than having properties attached to different classes, they just decided to make classes out of it. And then you come down to, for example, there's like frozen chicken, frozen beef, all these things that go under food product by quality. And then you get the same things here, but for different, just like for the reason that they want it to be food product by type. So you go down, of course, food product by type, it goes to breakfast food, lunch food, snack food, and then of course you get beverage food product, which comes down to fermented beverage, which I also did not like that. And then fermented beverage goes to alcoholic beverage, and then plant-derived fermented beverage, which eventually comes down to fermented grain beverage and beer beverage. I mean, technically, grain is not the correct term. You can have beers from legumes as well, but I'm not gonna go there for now. But when you go to alcoholic beverages, you still have your grain-based alcoholic beverage, which eventually comes down to rice beer and porter, which are not under beer beverage. And that was something that was really interesting to me. I was like, why are we doing this here? So a lot of reasons to want to use beer ontology, make beer ontology as an example of things that are wrong with food ontology. Now, you come down to beer again, things that I find not correct in beer and food on. So when you come down to beer, you have beer such as low alcohol beer, light beer, beer like such a small size, made from concentrate. And I was like, okay, these are interesting classes, but again, this does not give us much information about the beer itself, rather than just like how does it come in, which apparently is something that works for the food industry in general, like a food industry, an ontology for food industry, which is comes at such a large scale. So this is an example of my beer ontology. I just picked milk stout, which it's a little hard to read maybe. So milk stout is a type of stout, which is ale. Ale is, of course, one of the two main categories of beer. You get either ale or lager, which are mainly defined by the temperature at which the fermentation happens in, and the kind of yeast used. So beer, I was not that in a huge. I didn't have much of a problem with using beer in the way that putting beer in the way that Food On puts it. In most cases, I recognize it as a fermented beverage, which is a fermented food product, which of course is processed, and it goes up as Food On does. But then at the same time, I wanted some property, some qualitative properties for milk stout, which it comes in color black. That's the way to do it, which does not have a color hue. And then you go up with what the phenotype and trait ontology gave to do chromatic color being color, and color hue being optical properties, which is an electromagnetic radiation property, and it goes up to quality. On the other hand, the type of ingredients used. So I decided to have main ingredients and additional ingredients. Of course, malted barley was the main ingredient, which is just barley that goes through the process of malting. And of course, for my for the processes over here, I just decided to have fermentation and malting at the time. But then you have your additional ingredient, which is just cocoa bean. Again, both malted barley and cocoa bean. Well, malted barley is just a barley seed, and both of them are types of plant seed food product, which again comes down to being a food product, but they're not processed. So next steps for BeerOn, I mean, of course, it needs to be developed a lot more. I need more physical qualities, which of course it's an important thing in for recognizing beers, such as the flavor, color, hue, brightness, temperature. Usually is another thing which I'm going to talk on in a little. The type of ingredients used, go into detail about the fermentation process and adding packaging process, and of course, beer comes in so many different types, so you can't go wrong with adding more. One of the biggest things for me was finding a place for yeast, which I'm challenging to find one because it's technically not a food product, but it is an ingredient, which I was trying to find a place for it. Or maybe it should not be recognized as an ingredient, but just as as something that happens in the fermentation process, something that is added in the fermentation process, but it's not an ingredient for the beer itself. And then I want to eventually add some data to basically match with my ontology to see how that works. More properties and relations, of course, creating properties and relations, of course, was challenging for me. Especially for relations that relation functions that have a numerical output. For example, again, temperature was one of the biggest challenges for me, which I still am dealing with. And the getting my protege knowledge a little, getting better at my protege at doing working with protege, of course, is a bigger challenge. So yeah, that's mostly it. Thank you and cheers. If you have any questions, go. Yes.
Could you turn to the page 10? Okay.
Oh, nope, sorry. Pushed the wrong button.
10, yeah.
Yeah.
Here, could you define food product as a food material?
Yes.
But I think product and material are different things. Why? Because famous philosophical question is the question of statue and lump. Statue David is artifact. Yeah. It is constituted by a lump of clay, and the lump of clay is the material that constitutes that statue. But so I think product is different from its material.
I mean, it is different, but it is food product is something that it's a food material that is produced to be edible, like to be consumed. So I still don't think it's an issue with food product being a food material. I mean, of course, you could go with the argument of like maybe it's a role of a food material, or maybe adding some like fiat object to the argument. But that was something that I mean, I'm still, again, that is a good question that I'm still dealing with. But this is how BeerOn did it, and some smaller ontologies did it. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep it the way it is. Yeah, but it's a good point.
So,
yes, Robert.
I forget what might have been slide 4. But you were talking about a problem about grain-based beverages.
Oh, here. It's here.
Okay, so beers are grain-based beverages, right?
That's what Food Ontology says.
That's what do you say?
Well, not all beers are. I mean, so what I have here, I just recognize beer as a fermented beverage.
Okay, good. Because I was going to mention gluten-free beer.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. And legume beer, like, lentil beer is like not grain-based beverage.
Okay.
But it was really interesting. Again, like technically rice is a grain, but why isn't it here? Or like barley is a grain. But yeah, so that was the main thing. But yeah, I definitely agree. Beer is not necessarily a grain-based beverage.
Okay, great. Got it. Thank you.
It is based on seeds mostly. Like that's the way to go with it. Any other questions?
Can you go to?
Oh, Alex, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering is food waste a food product?
I have not done that, but that's that. So I mean, let's see. Would food waste be a?
I'm just wondering, according to your.
Like, what kind of waste are you talking about? The waste of like during making the making it, or like whatever is left over and you're tossing out.
There's stuff, used up pops, maybe they get thrown. Is that a food product? And your
Interesting. Yes, I would say. I mean, let's see. So technically, they're used for what they put in, but the whole thing is not. So I mean, technically, like I don't know, like a lamb chop, would the bone be considered a food product itself?
Products
no.
Product to be consumed, so maybe like waste is not consumed, so it's not a product. I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say no, it's not a food product. But that's something that I have
So
not thought
the
about it.
Product life cycle ontology is created for manufacturing, start with the raw materials and then the assembly process and then the product appears.
Yeah.
Then you have maintenance and then you have disposal.
Hmm.
And that means you need 5 different ontologies to
That's
entire product life cycle. I think you would need that for beer and for food.
okay.
So I think that the main problem that Foodon is dealing with and the main problem that you are dealing with is the problem of multiple inheritance. I claim that building ontologies with single inheritance, which means every term has exactly, or at most one parent,
Hmm.
the root node doesn't have any parent, is a good practice. And there are various reasons, but the most important one is that you know exactly how to make the definitions conform to the structure of the ontology, because every term in the ontology has a definition which begins by explaining what is special about it as compared to all the other subtypes of the parent
Yes.
term. So an A is a B, which C's is a formula for definitions which only works if you have single inheritance.
Yeah.
Now, beer is a grain-based beverage, and beer is a fermented beverage, and that may lead, that's an example of what may lead to multiple inheritance. And Foodon allows that.
Well, what I try to do with it is keep it as, I mean, technically I say it's a fermented beverage, and then you have, you know, grain or seed, plant-based fermented beverage, and then
Yeah,
you go
so
to.
you-
So I try to.
Yeah, there are
keep
different
it-
ways of doing that. I'm not sure what the best way is for you, but I think that one way may be to have more than one ontology. And I will explain what I mean here. So this has been a problem for the food ontology business for 15 years. On the one hand, you have a list of foods and ingredients: barley, water, beer, and these are all mass nouns. And then on the other hand, you have a list of things which are produced or consumed, such as a pint of beer, a bottle of beer, and these are not mass nouns, these are count nouns. Now, when you're building a food ontology, you're going to need at least one mass noun ontology,
yes.
an ontology of types of substance: beer, water, grain, and so on. And you should do that. That should be one thing, and that would have nothing to do with product. It would just be the types of substance,
Mhm.
like chemistry.
Yes.
Then on the right-hand side, you have another ontology which is about count nouns. And beverage, food product, barley, malt beverage, these sound to me, all of them, like count nouns. Food material, all the environmental material, food material are mass nouns. So dinner food is a mass noun. So you can solve some of the problems of Foodon, which is what you want to do, by keeping the mass nouns in one ontology and putting the count nouns in another ontology.
True.
And that means doing something which Foodon maybe doesn't like to do, which is keeping the agrochemistry or agricultural chemistry on the one hand, and the consumer involvement with and the restaurant involvement with
and
food
then
on the other hand. So that would be what I would have to say.
Do you know who is, like, which organization or group is in charge of
I
Foodon?
sent you an email, so
Oh.
I think you should be in touch with the man.
Perfect. Thank you.
Damien Dooley, who is the
Oh, I've heard of him.
eminence of the
Okay.
food ontology, and he knows what he's doing, but he has to work with a number of cranks.
It's a lot of, like, it's a really massive ontology, so it
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.